thank you very much, Dr. Jha, for putting some light on chapter 9. Now finally we come to chapter 10 of this volume. This is the last chapter and examine prospects for India. Can you summarize the analysis of this chapter, what you think, and what you just kind of give a whole picture in chapter 10?
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, chapter 10 actually tries to think about what the prospects for India are, given this long history of what we have talked about in the previous chapters and in the previous volume. So let's just sit back and think about India a little bit. So India became independent on 15th August 1947 after 190 years of British rule, if you count the beginning of British rule as the Battle of Plassey in 1757. And prior to that, it was ruled by people who were originally invaders, and then they decided to settle down in India. Also, for a very long period, India was a subjugated country. And when the British left India, they left a very traumatized country. As we noted in the first volume, more than 52 million people had died in famines during British rule. There was widespread prevalence of Kwashiorkor, which actually made full growth for Indian children very difficult, at least in the early years. It improved over time, but this is a genetic condition which lasts from one generation to the next. So, and India had Indians had a longevity of 32 years. The average Indian used to die at the age of 32. The rate of literacy was 10%. The poverty rate was above 60%. And so all these were economic indicators, but more important than that, or equally important, if not more important, is the fact that British rule robbed India of its self-confidence. A country which has such a huge, long history, such a rich history, such a lot of cultural and spiritual attainments, suddenly felt that it did not know what to do with itself. Okay, and this goes back to the words of Macaulay, which we talked about in the earlier volume, where he had said that India India you cannot conquer simply by force. You have to conquer India by making sure that Indians look down upon themselves. They consider everything British as good, and they consider everything Indian as bad. Unless you break their spirit, you won't be able to rule over them. This is what they have done. This is where we were in 1947. So it was a huge reconstruction period, not just economic reconstruction, but societal reconstruction, cultural reconstruction that has to take place. So this is a very complex task, and I comment on some parts of it here. Really, this is something which needs to be thought through very carefully by a team of scholars. This is how they will go about doing it, but I comment on some of the principal components as I see them. So despite all these things, India actually opted for a fully liberal form of government in 1950 when India got its constitution. Everybody got the vote. Men, women, rich, poor, educated, uneducated, everybody got the vote, right? Every adult got the vote. And this is remarkable because if you look at, say, American history, America, which got its independence in 1776, gave women the vote in 1920, and it passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964. So just look at what America was, of course, much richer than India, and is much richer than India. So look at the huge jump that India made at that time. Huge confidence it displayed in its people, that the country would stay intact and the people would enjoy living in a liberal democracy. And the Western scholars used to scoff at India at that time and say, hey, you people are this is not simply unsustainable in a country like India. India has proved them wrong. India is the world's biggest democracy, functioning democracy. All groups of people are accommodated there peacefully, and the economy has grown. So it is a remarkable achievement. There's no question about that. It is an absolutely remarkable achievement. And I would venture to say that such an achievement has never happened in human history. Never happened in human history. So I think that Indians can be very happy at that. But there is a long way to go. There's a long way to go, and I try to isolate 3 or 4 areas of concern. The first area is insignificant, the slow economic growth over long periods of time. Okay, so so India's, as I indicated in the first volume, India's per capita GDP in 2006 was only 5 or 6 times its GDP per capita PPP in 1865. Whereas China has so only 5 times. China's GDP during the same time period increased 33 times. And so did there were remarkable increases in France and UK and Germany and US and every other country, Japan. So India has not had enough economic growth. And because of that, not having enough economic growth, we come to the second factor, which is that India has not been able to reduce poverty sufficiently. China's poverty was higher than India's until about the 1970s. And China has grown so fast for the past 30, 40 years. As a consequence of that, its poverty is now 1/3 of India's poverty. The rate of poverty is 1/3 of India's poverty. So economic growth, and despite higher inequality in China, India has much lower inequality than China. So despite beginning under favorable circumstances, India's slow economic growth has meant that it has not been able to reduce poverty sufficiently. So the main thing is to ensure that the country grows very fast for long periods of time. Economic growth is central. That will reduce poverty, maybe even eliminate poverty. And then there are these massive amounts of societal changes with respect to women, with respect to ethnicities, with respect to jatis and varnas and castes, whatever you like to call them, that I have talked about in these chapters. So all of these need to be addressed. So there are 2 factors that I want to talk about. You look at the third factor. The third factor that I think is terribly important is the growing criminalization of Indian politics. A lot of people with criminal records sitting in the Indian Parliament, sitting in the assemblies. Now this is not sustainable. This shouldn't happen. Criminals should not find a way to enter politics. Now there are two compounding factors there, 2 complicating factors there. One is that sometimes what you define as being criminal is a bit strange in India, because it says anybody against whom there is a criminal case. So sometimes an opposition party would levy a criminal charge against Mr. A to just call him a criminal. So maybe this is an overstated amount. This is an exaggerated number. The second thing is that those genuine cases where such criminalization exists, the judgments don't come in time. They get delayed a lot. So that those who are criminals cannot be weeded out earlier. They should be weeded out earlier and then treated as criminals. And sent to jail or whatever penalties that are due to them. So this is a matter of concern for Indian democracy, and I have talked about that in some detail, given facts and figures and so on. And finally, I want to talk about a subject which is many people find talking about difficult.
Mm.
But I'll talk about it anyway. And that is India's concept of secularism.
Mm.
A very contentious subject, I realize that, but I'll give you my point of view anyway. So secularism in the West means that the church and the state, or the religion and the state are separate. That is true in India.
Mm.
And it also means that, practically in social terms, it means that the society is so-called modern.
Mm.
And by being modern, it means that there is most people simply don't really believe in religious things, and they don't practice it, and they are not very serious about religion. That is modernism. So those are the two things that comprise secularism in most Western societies. Now Nehru tried to impose that kind of secularism on India. The church and the state are definitely separate. The Indian state is not Hindu, even though the countries that broke away from India, Pakistan and then later Bangladesh, Bangladesh was of course created from Pakistan, not a separate country. They all became religious countries, Islamic countries, but India didn't become a Hindu country. India opted to remain a secular country. But it doesn't necessarily follow that India would like to have the second part of Western secularism. I'll give you an example. If you contrast Nehru's view of secularism with Mahatma Gandhi's view of secularism. Nehru was not a religious person, everybody knows that, and he didn't have didn't say much about, or didn't have much religious dealings. But Gandhi was, if anything, Gandhi was a religious person. He was first a religious person, then a social leader. His abiding faith was his major strength. Everybody knows that, everybody who knows Gandhi knows that Gandhi's faith was his ultimate weapon. And he died with the words of God on his lips. So that strong faith he had. And he was the one who started this concept of Sarvadharma Sambhava. So Sarvadharma Sambhava, which we quote several times, saying that all religious paths are the same, we can come to the same goal no matter what religion we choose, is a Vedic phrase. It's a Vedic phrase, comes from that time, comes from the time when there was no Islam, no Christianity in India. And it was repeated by Gandhi in the 1930s to quell the Hindu-Muslim riots that had erupted at that time. It's strange to realize that in the 19th century, when India was so poor, there were very few communal riots in India. These riots started to grow when the move towards dividing India along religious lines, Hindu and Muslim, that started to grow. So in the 1930s, when these riots were very severe, Gandhi started this slogan of Sarvadharma Sambhava, all religions are equal. And he didn't say, don't have any religion. He didn't say that. In fact, he was more religious than anybody. But he said all religions should be respected, all religions should be treated equal. And if you look at recent surveys of attitudes, including by not just by an Indian group but by a German group, which I have quoted here in the book, most young Indians today are religious. People in their 20s and teens and 30s, they are religious people in India. So why do you want to impose on them the straitjacket of Western type of secularism? Why don't we move towards a more Gandhian type of secularism, which is more in line with India's cultural heritage? Okay, I quote a passage from the Guru Granth Sahib, actually here, which quotes the 13th century saint Namadev.
Mm.
Namadev says, beautiful passage I think, I'm just translating. Namadev says that human life is, the goal of human life is spiritualism, not religious practices, secularism. So secularism is the fruit, and religious practices are the flower. So without abandoning the flower, we cannot attain the fruit. We cannot come to the stage of the fruit without abandoning the flower. So all religions talk about spiritualism. Let us concentrate on that. Let us not crush religion or call religious practices evil or bad or whatever, divisive, or say that some groups are oppressing some people. Let us keep that in mind. Let us look more closely at Gandhi's view of secularism and abandon Nehru's view of secularism. India is not a Western society. Its cultural origins are not in the ideas and the practices that mark Western society. Its cultural origins are somewhere very different. So this is what I argue in the book, that we should go towards that, towards making, this will make society more cohesive. This will make society more peaceful, and people will be able to cooperate with each other better and work faster and work more effectively for the nation. I'll stop there.
All right, Dr. Jha, thank you so much. I think that was really a positive discussion, and thanks for sharing all your research work and some of the key points that you work really hard in your book. So everyone, as I can just show you once again, the book by Dr. Raghvendra Jha, Facets of India's Economy and Her Society. It's volume 2 that we were talking about, and it's subtitled Current State and Future Prospects. So Dr. Jha has worked really hard. So I believe, Dr. Jha, can you tell a little bit about the book, if it's available online, and so if they want to have more wider read of your book?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, this book is, both these volumes are available online in Kindle edition. They are quite inexpensive, so you can buy these books and read them online as well. Both are published by Paul Graham Macmillan from the United Kingdom, and I look forward to any thoughts that you may have on the book, as well as on these videos that will be posted on YouTube. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, everyone. So please do comment under the YouTube, so whatever you think about the discussions we had, and so Dr. Jha can bring some more interesting topics about his research work in the coming videos we will be doing. And thank you very much for all your time, and hope we will see you back again with some more interesting research by Dr. Jha. Thank you very much for watching.